Okay, so I wanted to welcome everyone today. I'm Susan Asadi. I'm the Executive Director of the Global Chamber New York City, and I'd like to welcome you to our Globinar. Today, we'll be discussing DEI in the global marketplace and addressing challenges and planning for success. For anyone on this call who is not familiar with what Global Chamber is, we are a growing community of CEOs, executives, and leaders in over 525 regions around the world. And I'm so grateful that our members from around the globe have joined us and extend a warm welcome. If you're not one of the speakers, please mute your microphone until the end of the formal program, and we hope to have enough time to open it up to Q&A. So just to give you a little bit of context, according to the UN Global Impact, 1 in 6 people worldwide experience some type of discrimination, with women and people with disabilities affected mostly. Inequality threatens long-term social and economic development and jeopardizes social cohesion. It harms poverty, reduction in causes disparities in opportunities and outcomes, and impeding economic efficiency. Promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion throughout business operations is an important step in tackling inequality. Some of the challenges just recently that I've noticed, the Society for Human Resource Management announced it dropped the word equity from its diversity, equity, inclusion strategy, and thereby setting off somewhat of a bomb in the relatively staid world of corporate HR. So in the big picture, many companies are rethinking, changing, or even abandoning DEI work. I noticed just last week, CNN disbanded its race and equality reporting group, integrating those reporters across the newsroom. And according to the Society for Human Resource Management, by emphasizing inclusion first, they aim to address the current shortcomings of DEI programs. Even with the US presidential election, we've all noticed a heightened rhetoric about DEI. And some say this Project 2025 that's been put forth by a conservative think tank seeks to eliminate DEI programs throughout the federal government and in universities. So these are just some of the challenges going on, and we certainly have noted others. PR News recently mentioned that moving more towards a centrist position might help, the employment of DEI throughout companies and the government. So with our discussion today, we're going to look at how DEI has impacted each one of our panelists' careers and how the current changes are going on, might impact them, and even if they should exist, DEI programs should exist. So we will have 5 speakers, and each will speak briefly about their DEI experience. And I will be giving a brief introduction for each one of them. And at the end, you will have a chance to ask the panelists some questions. So our first speaker is Dr. Daisy Khan. She's a founder of Women's Islamic Initiative in Spirituality and Equality. And she is an award-winning speaker, author, activist, commentator, and the founder of Women's Islamic Initiative in Spiritual Equality. With over 2 decades of grassroots involvement in combating anti-Muslim bias, she's recognized as a thought leader on Muslim women's rights and Islam in America. So Daisy, could you share with us, thank you for joining us, some of your experience with DEI and your insights?
So thank you so much, Susan, for having me. And thank you to all the people, my co-panelists, and also those who are listening in. I think that it's always important to start with a person's background, because that shapes a lot of the work that some of us do, particularly myself. Like many immigrants, I came to America traversing oceans and mountains to seek opportunity. And consistent with my common immigrant experience, I focused my energies on education and establishing myself here in the United States. I began a successful professional career as an interior architect, working eventually for Fortune 500 companies. I became an architectural designer and was literally living the American dream. And yet, it's remarkable how your life is moving in one direction only to be dramatically altered by certain events. For me, this was September 11th. Although this tragedy engendered a great deal of internal reflection and soul searching, for me, it was very personal. And because I began to feel a burden of what it meant to be a Muslim woman. I, at that point, was the solo Muslim employee in major corporations, and I felt that a mandate was being thrust upon me to make a choice. Should I continue with my corporate career or am I being called to uplift my community? I eventually, after 25 years of a successful corporate career, quit and dedicated myself to community service. And the first thing I did, because I came from a very multicultural, multi-religious environment, I grew up in Kashmir in the northern part of India, had interacted with every great world religion. I immediately reached out to my interfaith, a trio of Jewish, Muslim, and Christian women to raise our voices together, to affirm our commonalities. I was afraid that that divides were being created. And I knew that at our heart, we wanted to proclaim our unity as humans. So we created theatrical productions like Same Difference. We followed that by creating a collaborative interfaith breaking bread together, a theatrical production where we sat at long tables to share food and deepen our connections with one another. And these 16 interfaith organizations have continued and grown beyond that. And today in New York City, we could have close to 200 people, interfaith organizations that come together at a moment's notice. And these relationships do continue to this day. In 2006, because of what was happening with Muslim women around the globe, I immediately founded WISE, which is a global network of Muslim women change makers to reclaim our sacred rights. And after 9/11, I really wanted to build a practical unity, not just a theoretical unity. Oftentimes we talk in terms of theory, but what is practical unity? Where we can build a future together, come together as all Americans, create a place where we can meet and greet, and 10 blocks from Ground Zero, where Muslims could be part of rebuilding of Lower Manhattan. I wanted to extend a healing hand and build a community center where all of those interfaith allies that we had could come together. And but I was told, no, not you, not here, not now. And that was very painful because it was the first time I felt what discrimination was, and that hurt. And so what do we do now in this moment of polarization? And what really is going on, and where is this conflict coming from? I look at conflict from a very different point of view. I look at it from, I do not recognize myself in you. And that is what these great divides are all about. It can be man versus woman, white against black, left versus right, northern versus southerner, Democrat versus Republican. This list is endless, and you see it playing out every single day in our news media. But this is not a Muslim problem. It's not a Jewish problem. This is an American problem. Our nation is torn by extremists and divided by Islamophobes, and there is an essential misunderstanding of where the middle stands. So I, as a Muslim minority, 10% of the US population, we are dehumanized, hated, threatened, harassed, bullied, assaulted, stereotyped, discriminated, and doxxed. And this is the American pluralistic experiment shaped by religious and cultural diversity that is under severe threat. But really, it doesn't have to be this way. And there are many people who have recognized that it should not be this way. Extremists don't have to win, and there should not be an extreme reaction to it. So as forward-thinking, peace-loving individuals, we have to step into the arena to stop all forms of hate from spreading. And my way of voting for peace and my contribution to peace is to empower individuals who are passionate about unity, who are passionate about building bridges, who are passionate about reaching across aisles. But this requires providing people with knowledge, clear those misunderstandings, open people's hearts, and reveal a simple truth that all humans have emerged from the same place, sprung from the same spring, and fashioned from the same clay. So this is what we are here today to learn, to understand, to stand true to the American value of pluralism. So in this current moment, I can then describe in detail exactly the work that I'm doing, but this is where I'm coming from. Thank you, Susan.
Well, I have some questions for you, but why don't you, rather than we do the 4 questions, why don't we take briefly a half 30 seconds and talk about the work you're doing?
So the work I'm doing right now is the work that I had done after 9/11, which was to reach across aisles, became very urgent right after the Israel-Gaza war. And it was clear to me that I had been equipped to be a bridge builder, and I immediately responded when I received my first call from a law firm saying that they wanted to have somebody come in and talk about Islamophobia and educate the people. So this work has become very important because not only is it law firms, it's corporations, it's all kinds of places of worship and schools that are reaching out to really provide this knowledge to clear misunderstandings and stereotypes of Muslims.
Okay, so I have two questions for you. You may have covered this a bit. Is there a role for religion, particularly to bring together diverse communities?
Yeah, well, yes, of course. America is home to all the world's great religions, which is what makes it interesting. And that is also reflected in the workplace. Absolutely. Religion can divide, but religion can also play a very crucial role in uniting diverse communities, both in society, as I have seen in my own work. I have seen real successes and also in business. Because at its core, all religions emphasize values of compassion, justice, and respect for others, which is a common ground that we can all stand on. And also, religious principles promote ethical practices. They promote inclusivity. Believe it or not, they do promote inclusivity because we all sprung from the same clay and provide a sense of belonging. For instance, I used to host brown bag lunches at my workplace because I had a very diverse work staff. And I would ask different people to volunteer and do a presentation about their faith. This was so wildly successful because people began to notice the commonalities, but they also appreciated the differences. And it encouraged respect for that person's belief and practices and really created a very harmonious and fun environment. So religions also emphasize social responsibility and giving back. Every religion talks about tithing and giving back, and it can inspire businesses to engage in more socially and environmentally responsible practices because environmental stewardship is part of all of our faiths.
Okay, Daisy, thank you so much. We could go on and on discussing this, but now I want to move on to our next speaker, and we will have some time at the end to ask more questions. Thank you, and you'll be staying with us. Next up is Tawana Bain. She's the Chief Executive Officer and Chairwoman of the Board of American Clean Resources Group. And in a male-dominated field, Tawana is the only one or few African-American women who is a CEO of a sustainability company. She is active in philanthropic and government relations throughout her work as founder of Derby Diversity Week and has been nationally recognized for building equity initiatives for Black entrepreneurs and other marginalized groups. She has an extensive history in environmental programs that require community buy-in and marketing strategy of environmental restoration efforts, diversity, equity, inclusion around tourism for horse racing, and technical support of consent decrees for the monitoring and documentation of water and land space. She's been recognized as one of the top 50 most powerful women among her business peers and has recently received many awards, including the Hallmark Cards Mahogany Award. So Tawana, welcome. And if you could share with us something about your work and how DEI has informed your career and your business.
Susan, thank you so very much for having me today. I've been looking forward to this conversation. I do believe that, what we're seeing today in the market demonstrates clearly that DE&I is broken. But I don't think that it became broken overnight. Once it came up against political and legal opposition, I do firmly believe that it's been broken for a very long time. And quite frankly, if it wasn't, I don't think we'd be having this conversation today. I'd also like to preface, my comments with, in order to have contempt for anything, I think you have to be willing to listen. And as an advocate for effective DE&I, I have really leaned into this topic because I don't believe that majority of America does not want opportunities for everyone. But I do believe that it has received a bad rep because it wasn't designed to be tied to the same outcomes that other leaders are held to. And so today I'll offer, a nuanced perspective on the impact of DE&I specifically within corporate environments based on my lived experience as a supplier. I hope that I can shed light on my personal experiences, both from progress and challenges. There's about 7 key insights that I have had on, through my journey, and my observations specifically are in serving, government, healthcare, automotive, and financial industries through several service offerings. Today as the CEO of American Clean Resources Group in the sustainable mining and reclamation space, but prior to that, it was also in the consulting, research, back office support, and also print industry. And I think the first thing that I would say is that, hopes are often tested with DE&I. Because initially, many come into this space with the hope of presenting opportunities for hardworking, qualified individuals through people that come into their roles with authenticity around championing diversity. But oftentimes those hopes are challenged over time because of the complexities that they face, including a lot of the unspoken aversion that they received, career safety, selective support, the disconnect between revenue targets, the reactive hiring practices, a lot of which we've seen post and during George Floyd, and then the constant need to justify the existence of their programs, especially from an economic perspective. And, when we think about it from those key areas, I would like to say that I think the disconnect from revenue is probably one of the most important. And when DE&I efforts are not directly linked to driving consumer behavior or revenue generation, it is a missed opportunity given the changing demographics of the consumer base and how they are viewed by their peers within the organization. As it relates to the unspoken risk aversion, I heard this saying, and I have really coined it because I believe it's true. I think corporate America seems to have split personality syndrome often, depending on where you are within the organization. Because as a DE&I leader getting started, you're eager and, you're excited to share all the great suppliers that only to learn, soon after, your colleagues' views different, especially in procurement, legal, and accounting, where they're generally risk averse. And especially if the potential risk on bringing in certain suppliers does not clearly promise substantial returns. And that can be despite understanding that diversity can foster innovation because the time required to develop diverse firms can often be at odds with the fast-paced market of competition. And then, the reactive hiring, that we've experienced. There has been some instances where superficial hiring practices have really hurt things. And companies have hastily hired diverse figureheads to be able to say, that they've addressed the issue without ensuring that the person had the necessary experience to lead, underperformance. And those things reinforce skepticism towards DE&I. And I think those are some of the remnants of, what we're experiencing today. Because every other department is required and entrusted to tie their goals and their objectives to revenue targets. So how can a DE&I leader gain the respect and support from their peers if they're getting a pass on this? So I do firmly believe that DE&I professionals must possess a solid educational background and business fundamentals if they're going to be effective at integrating DE&I strategies into the core business operations, financial objectives to contribute to the company's success so that we're not looked at as merely, a feel-good measure. Career safety is something I've often heard, professionals in DE&I might avoid making or taking bold steps because they're worried about disrupting their career stability, particularly in environments when conformity is mostly rewarded with job security. Selective support, I've seen this 1,000 times over. Some forward companies, have attempted to cultivate diversity by selectively scaling up a few firms with significant support and resources. And that can sometimes lead to discord and competition within minority communities where there's only a few that they're concentrating on, making it difficult for other diverse firms to thrive. And then, constantly having to justify yourself. DE&I initiatives are often in a position where they are constantly having to prove their worth, and yet given the responsibility to drive DE&I without the authority to integrate it into the outcomes of ROI. And so, you know, when I look at this topic, and I hope as everyone is looking at this topic today and rebuilding and starting over, or coming up with creative approaches, is that until DE&I solutions are directly tied to revenue outcomes, we really do delude ourselves into believing that entities designed under the premise of capitalism will ever truly invest and support DE&I to help it thrive. And so again, I'm happy to be here today and really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you, Tawana. So I now have just a couple of questions for you because I think you addressed some of the questions I had in your presentation, which was terrific. You know, there was a recent ruling by a federal appeals court in Atlanta blocking the Fearless Funds grant program for Black women. How do you see this ruling impacting DEI in America as it relates to Black women?
You know, I do believe that that decision was not just a legal matter, but definitely a reflection on broader societal attitudes towards racial equity and supporting Black women specifically. But my hope is that it becomes an outrage not to just Black people, but to all people. Because supporting qualified Black women is not about filling quotas or meeting diversity targets, but it really is about recognizing and nurturing talent that historically has been overlooked. You know, Black women face numerous barriers, including systemic racism, gender bias, and lack of access to network and resources. And so I really hope that this was one of those kind of smack you dead in the face in all races and genders, understanding that we have to be much, much more proactive in supporting and elevating Black women to leadership positions.
Okay, and I have one other question for you. As the only Black female CEO of a company in a male-dominated industry, how does that impact your leading of this public company?
I wouldn't say it certainly doesn't define my leadership, Susan, but for me personally, it is a reminder each time I look in the mirror of the responsibility that I hold to ensure that I open the door wide enough to change the landscape for those coming behind me.
Okay, thank you. We're going to have a couple of questions at the end, and you know we could certainly talk forever, but I just want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to speak. Thank you, Tawana. Up next is Louisa Drescher. She's the president and CEO of Mastering Cultural Differences and has over 20 years of experience in DEI and cultural competence development. Her global and domestic diversity expertise has led to publications, speaking invitations, and trading opportunities for numerous audiences, including multinational corporations, government agencies, and nonprofit organizations. She is a contributing writer to over 200 to several publications, and her articles have reached over 200,000 individuals. And she's the author of a book called Mastering Cultural Differences, the same as the name of her company, I believe, where she provides insight into how cultural differences impact today's diverse workplace. So Louisa, if you want to share with us some comments, I'd appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Well, hello, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for the invitation. This is a very exciting and timely topic. I'm originally from Brazil. I came to the United States to pursue my graduate studies, which fast forward several years has led to a very fulfilling and privileged career. I have had the opportunity to work in Japan, in Puerto Rico, in Spain, Ukraine, and I've met people from all over the world, worked with visiting scholars and scientists from around the world. And what became very clear to me was that I am really passionate about helping individuals build bridges across differences. If I were to use a word to describe myself, that word would be connector. And that is why, I work with organizations in two areas, the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and cultural competence development. In the area of cultural competence, what I have seen is that despite globalization, despite increased immigration, many team leaders still fail to recognize how cultural differences impact their operations. So that's why at Mastering Cultural Differences, which is my company, we offer the Global Academy, which is a series of workshops to help individuals understand cultural differences so they can work well across those differences. And what I found was that after going through these workshops, I often hear that individuals no longer, they live in fear that they will inadvertently offend a client or a colleague because now they have a better understanding of cultural differences. I started working in the area of DEI. So I started in global, cultural differences, focusing on cultural differences, and I also added DEI to my work. Because there were occasions, like some of the previous speakers have mentioned, where I was made to feel that I was not inadequate. I did not belong. I was not enough, which is how individuals who are in the numerical minority often feel. So what I came to understand was that recognizing differences was not enough. In other words, bringing diverse talent in is just the first step. Organizations need to ensure that they have equitable practices as well as an inclusive environment. Otherwise, employees will not stay. In other words, diversity, equity, and inclusion are equally important. The problem is that when it comes to DEI, most organizations are failing to implement effective and long-lasting initiatives. So that's why I created the DEI Leadership Academy to help organizations understand DEI and really learn the steps that they need to take to ensure that DEI is really truly embedded in the fabric of the organization. As far as how DEI informs my work, my belief is that when we understand, when we respect, when we value differences, we really can create an environment where every employee feels that they can bring their best selves to work, regardless of their identity. They don't have to leave parts of their identity at the proverbial gate, so to speak, be it their religion, their sexual orientation, their age, their nationality. They can bring their authentic selves to work. And that's what DEI plays an important role in.
Thank you, Louisa. You may have addressed some of this already, but I wanted to ask you, why do you think so many DEI initiatives fail?
Although there has been a lot of research showing the importance of DEI for organizational success, like as I mentioned, many organizations still struggle to create successful DEI practices. And there are many reasons for that. I'll just address a few of them. I think the first one is that DEI requires culture change. And I think it was former President Woodrow Wilson who said, if you want to make enemies, try to change something. And that's because change is hard, especially the profound and lasting culture change that DEI requires. Change is scary. All of a sudden, the workplace you are familiar with is at risk of going away, and for reasons that you may not understand or you may not agree with. I also would say that there's a lot of fear in the workplace that needs to be addressed. I worked with a CEO once who came to me and said, Louisa, I had no ideas how much fear my employees were carrying around. And change is also very uncomfortable. And it will be uncomfortable because many individuals are having to grapple with these issues around DEI for the first time. They have never had to address these conversations before. Another reason is I think we tend to focus too much on what is easy or the proverbial low-hanging fruit. And by that, I mean organizations put their effort on performative actions. They focus on cultural celebrations and social gatherings, one-off trainings, mainly to check the proverbial box. Don't get me wrong, these things are important and we need them, but they are not enough. Leaders need to take, to look deeper into their organization. They need to learn about the challenges the underrepresented employees are facing. Are there salary inequities in the organization? Are there biases in hiring? Are marketing practices attuned to the needs of diverse clientele? And much, much more. So they need to go beyond the surface. And I
Okay.
think
So I wanted to ask you about the fear. What did you recommend to that CEO and others to try to mitigate some of the fear within his corporation? Did you have any strategies that you would recommend?
I would say, first of all, CEOs need to do the work first. They need to understand who they are, what their beliefs are. Self-work is important. In fact, the road to culture competence development starts within. And I would say having really, respectful, meaningful conversations in the workplace, so that we can come together and learn from each other, understand each other, and really dialogue, have a dialogue. I was reflecting on this the other day, and I thought, in the United States, children learn how to debate at a very early age. And the focus of debate is, I am right, you're wrong, and my job is to prove that you're wrong. So we need to start dialoguing. We need to start having respectful conversations so that we can understand where each other is coming from.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Luisa. I'm sure we're going to have questions for you maybe from the audience, but we'll have some time at the end to have more discussion on this. Up next is Francisco Gomez. He's the founder and CEO of Factum Global. He's an expert in strategy development and business planning for companies and nonprofit organizations with a particular expertise in global expansion. Of course, for the Global Chamber, this is very important. How do you expand globally, and how does this topic of DE&I impact that? Before launching Factum Global, Francisco served as Director of Global Strategy and Market Development at the American Chemical Society, where he led a multifunction department, including international operations, research, and product development. He is from Colombia. He's fluent in Spanish and Portuguese, and an interesting follow-up to Luisa, both of you with some South American background. So Francisco, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us. If you could give us some of your comments on this topic.
Thank you, Susan. It's an honor to speak about the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion in a global context. I'm going to do my best to follow those great comments from our colleagues. Luisa, I can share a lot of what you were thinking. As a Colombian American myself, clearly we've faced similar kinds of things in our life in the U.S. But as our world becomes increasingly interconnected, I think the significance of DEI cannot be overstated, and we do, as it has been said before, to oversimplify and focus on the surface of this topic. But a diverse and inclusive workplace enhances creativity, problem solving, business performance, and it creates a dynamic environment where innovation truly thrives. So when you think about DEI, it's important to understand that it is crucial for creating a workplace that leverages diverse perspectives to drive that innovation and improve that decision making. As a Colombian American, as I was saying, I immigrated to the U.S. over 20 years ago, and I have had the fortune to work across the world throughout my entire career, and I've seen firsthand how different DEI practices vary across regions and impact people differently depending on where you are and depending on your background and what you bring with you. So when we look at diversity from a global lens, it really broadens the definition significantly. To truly achieve inclusivity, we must understand and respect those cultural differences. And we have to have effective DEI strategies that involve customizing global frameworks to fit local cultural norms and understanding how to fit that to local values. This ensures that our programs, our products, our services are relevant and respectful of those diverse cultural backgrounds in the places where we're trying to do business or we're trying to interact. The question is, how do we adapt DEI for global context? And to successfully adapt DEI strategies globally is essential to understand the purpose, behind this effort. Why are you doing it? And so when you're looking at it from a company perspective, what is your why, right? Why is this company even trying to do this? And you need to collect both qualitative and quantitative information from a variety of sources that include your staff, industry leaders, if you're in the nonprofit world, from your members, as well as external experts that can provide a comprehensive understanding of what the company needs are. This foundation will allow decision makers to develop inclusive environments that are really truly tailored to all employees and stakeholders. There is no one size fits all. I mean, if you think about that approach for DEI, you're going to fail. A US-centric approach, for example, won't resonate with broader members, teams, and customers around the world because the concept of DEI varies so greatly. So when you think about it, we've all heard this word. I don't like cliche words, but the whole concept of global, right? Global focus with flexibility for local context. It is truly key. And so the word has sort of stuck because it carries a lot of meaning. So having an approach that is global ensures that DEI strategies are adaptable and culturally sensitive, which will foster an inclusivity across all regions. But is that enough? Not really, right? Training, talking about it, it's really not enough. In fact, in Global, we offer cultural sensitivity and communications training, but when we do these for our clients, we do it as the first step and not as a comprehensive solution. So while training is important, effective DEI training goes beyond traditional methods. We're really talking about learning and having accountability, and they need to go hand in hand, right? Emphasizing the development of intellectual, social, emotional skills, providing regular training sessions, workshops, but also adding real life application scenarios, which can help embed DEI principles into the organizational culture. And I think it was mentioned before, that is what it's all about. It's how do you change that culture and you ensure that it's sustainable, right? The good news is that more help is coming. So when we think about the future of DEI, emerging trends and technologies are truly shaping the DEI efforts, right? AI and data analytics, for instance, are powerful tools for enhancing DEI. AI can increase workplace accessibility. It can personalize DEI training experiences. It can help in identifying patterns of inequity. I think we were just talking about, are people being paid properly? Are there differences in salaries? AI and technology can help with those things. It also helps in removing human bias in hiring processes. But obviously, it is crucial to recognize the risk associated with AI, right? We need to understand how to use it, and we must not solely rely on these tools for decision making. It's important to have an adaptive global tech strategy, that includes audits and safeguards and things about the ethical guidelines that are consistent with the values of your organization, so that we can ensure that we harness the benefits of AI while at the same time mitigating potential harm to the organization and to the people that we're trying to serve. Is it easy? Obviously not. Implementing DEI globally comes with its challenges. What works in one region, as I was saying, is not going to work in another. Different countries and regions have varying DEI priorities. So cultural competence training is essential to enhance that understanding among global team members, but a comprehensive training on cultural differences and sensitivities, can help bridge those gaps for respect. So at the end, how do we ensure representation and inclusion when we're thinking about recruitment and retention in our companies, right? And I think there are several things that we can think about. One, in terms of recruitment, is diverse sourcing channels, right? Partnering with diverse organizations, universities, professional associations to attract candidates from underrepresented groups. Post the job openings on platforms that cater to diverse audiences. We also want to ensure that we have inclusive job descriptions. Many times I'm browsing job descriptions, I'm browsing things, and I see bias in the language that is utilized in this description. So using bias-free language in job descriptions and focusing on essential skills rather than a strict educational or experience requirements is essential. How do you structure the interview process? So implementing standardized interview questions and including diverse members on interview panels to reduce that bias and ensure fair evaluations, right? So you don't want to have people from sort of the same background evaluating your potential candidates. You want to be diverse even in the people that are interviewing. And then in terms of retention, you got to make sure that you have inclusive onboarding, right? Providing comprehensive orientation that emphasizes the company's DEI values and resources. You want to pair new hires with mentors or buddies from similar backgrounds to help them integrate into the organization. You have to think about career development, so creating personalized development plans and offering leadership development programs for underrepresented groups is one strategy that works very well for many organizations. And it ensures that diverse employees have access to growth opportunities, which is really critical. There are employee resource groups that have been created in many companies, and they provide networking, support, and professional development opportunities for diverse employees. That's another strategy that can be used. But when it comes to leadership and decision making, it's important to ensure that leadership and the people that are making decisions reflect that diversity of the community that they're serving. So it's not enough to say we're hiring people from certain groups if they're not represented in the leadership positions of the organization. It's not about tokenism. It's not about how many people can we bring in, or if we can have the one person that represents the community. It truly is about setting an example for other employees and making them understand that the opportunities are there for everyone, right?
Okay, Francisco, this is wonderful, but we need to give Carissa a chance to speak. So could you wrap up?
Of course. Yeah, I was wrapping now. I mean, the last point is inclusive decision making, right? Involving employees from various backgrounds in the decision making process, just to make sure that this happens. I mean, it is a continuous journey, requires commitment, adaptability, and a deep understanding of culture.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you addressed all the issues I had in the questions, so I'm not going to ask you those individual questions. Okay.
That's fine.
Okay. Thank you so much, Francisco. Okay. Our last speaker is Carissa Begonia. She's the CEO of Conscious Exchange. She's a second-generation Filipino-American daughter of immigrants, and she's a business coach and founder of this company, which focuses on equity-focused coaching and consulting company with a mission to help BIPOC entrepreneurs secure time, location, financial and occupational freedom by building their own businesses. So Carissa, please share with us about what you do, your company, and how DEI has impacted you.
Yes, thank you, Susan, and everyone for joining us. I know it's hard to be the last speaker when you feel like all the things have to get rushed, but it's all good. I get it. I'd like to highlight that I am a Filipino-American daughter of immigrants because I think that's so important to name identities in the work that I do. And yes, I am a business coach and I focus on people of color, so Black, Indigenous, Native, Asian, Latin entrepreneurs, and really helping them start and grow or scale their businesses, particularly in the coaching, consulting, and service-based industries. So in terms of DEI, I think it's really important if you want to be successful in this, is that you know your why, you know your origin story. This work is hard. If maybe some of you are in DEI, maybe, kind of DEI interested, a DEI adjacent. And reality is this work is hard. It takes intentional effort, commitment. And frankly, it's not fun. I don't think it's fun. I think many of us are doing this work to fix an ism of racism, sexism, ageism, ableism. It's based on something challenging that many of us experienced in our lives that we wish we didn't go through. And it's a role I think that we take on that can be potentially triggering every time we step into a room to talk about it. So just really curious in the audience too, what is your why? Like, why are you here today? And what are you committed to? I'd love for you just to drop that in the chat if you feel so called to do so. But as you're doing that, so I can kind of see what else you're working at, what you're all bringing to the table here. My DEI journey, I thought, started in corporate America as the head of DEI at Zappos. But as I was unpacking things and really looking at my own values, my own identities and privileges in my training as an emotional intelligence coach, to supplement my DEI role, I realized that this journey started a long, long time ago when I was 9 on a family trip to Disney World. And I was in a pool, to give you some of the story background here. I was in a pool, swimming, minding my business with my family. And a little white boy pointed at me and said, I don't want to swim in a pool with Chinese people. And I was so confused because my best friend, I grew up in a white neighborhood in the suburbs of New York, in New York City. And my best friend looked like him. I'm not Chinese. And I said, well, why does that matter anyway? I didn't have the language at this time, right? And then even prior to that training, which happened in my 30s, and I realized that I had been holding onto rage subconsciously, resentfulness, and the more insidious impact of that is internalized racism that really shaped my life, what I ate, who I dated, how I was successful in climbing the corporate ladder. So people ask me in my business now, like, why do I focus on people of color, people of the global majority? And initially I didn't. I didn't want to be pigeonholed, right? But with that reflection, I realized that why was I successful in climbing the ladder? Was it because I was conditioned to be more aggressive? Was I fighting that experience from when I was 9 and told I wasn't effectively told I wasn't good enough, or I should to be even in the same pool together? So with that success, I realized I was often climbing the ladder and finding myself as the only woman of color, the youngest person with my seat at the table with the decision-making role. And a lot of the places I was in, as I moved from corporate to entrepreneurship. And in talking with friends, colleagues, other peers, I know that this is a common experience for people of color. The feeling of being the only, the other, right? Different. And so now my goal is to really create a space, with my company, like even opportunities where none of us, like I don't have to feel like the first, only, or other anymore, right? And how we can more at large create a society where none of us have to feel others, be treated poorly, be sued, held to different standards because of the color of our skin. So I started Conscious Exchange because as a DEI consultant, I was struggling to find mentors, business coaches who really understood the nuances of DEI work, the sensitivities of this space. And it was, successful in building my business. I also became a LinkedIn top voice, a micro influencer. People started asking me how do I do this? Like, how did you do this so easily? I was getting invited to speak at places like Calendly and Eventbrite. And so I pivoted my work as a DEI consultant into business coaching, where I was showing people how to also build successful businesses. Because you might be an expert in what you do for the last 10, 20 years, entrepreneurship, being a business owner is a different skill set and could be in something new that when we come from, say, families where we don't have other entrepreneurs or friends there aren't any entrepreneurs, it feels lonely again, right? So at Conscious Exchange, we're building this ecosystem of BIPOC entrepreneurs to learn and grow together. We do this through mentorship community called The Exchange. I do live streams with my show called Built by BIPOC, and also offer group coaching and one-on-one coaching programs. And also, I'm mostly excited about recently is building a directory of BIPOC coaches, consultants, and online service providers, because I was just really tired of people saying, I can't find XYZ talent, I can't find diverse talent. And so building this directory is helpful to combat this excuse that people have that they can't create a diversified organization. So if you'd like to learn more about the directory, or if you'd like to learn more about my programs, as a LinkedIn expert, I invite you to DM me on LinkedIn.
That's great. Carissa, thank you very much. You also addressed most of the questions I had for you. I did want to ask you to expand a little bit on what you talked about, how, identity issues. What do you think of the concept of intersectionality? And what do you do to help entrepreneurs break any boxes they might find themselves in?
Yeah, thanks, Susan. I love this question because, like I told you, I'm a Filipina daughter of immigrants, right? I think identity and naming your intersecting identities is so important, because sometimes you just don't realize or know. And I think a lot of times too, my experience, internalized racism, I stifled that. I shut that down. I didn't want people to know. I already present a certain way and that would be judged. So I wanted to mitigate that. And that's terrible, to try to hide who you are. right? And that is the foundation of the work I do. And so I think it's really important to name the identities that we're proud to share. Now we might not be able to share or feel comfortable sharing all of them yet, right? But one example I'll give that I hear often is, hey, especially in entrepreneurship, like and being able to do all the things that we all have 24 hours in a day. No, we don't. Yes, we may all live like within a 24-hour cycle daily, right? But this is the issue between equality and equity, right? We don't, in those 24 hours, we don't have necessarily the same opportunities. Things might take longer. We might have we might have different barriers that make that 24 hours different for each of us of what we can do with that time. So something simple like that, when people just kind of just say like, we can all do it. No, we can't just all pull it up by our bootstraps and do the same things, right? Different folks. Again, I love the conversation on the Fearless Fund. Being Black women is being told you can't do that, right? What white man has ever struggled to get billions of dollars to support their company? What fund has been sued, right? That was a targeted thing. Anyway, let me move on. But I think it's really important. Again, naming identity and being proud of that first and foremost, knowing your why as a marginalized person with marginalized identity. And then for folks, again, to know in the room that we're not all at the same starting place, right? And those different intersecting identities creates different levels of privileges, also dependent on the rooms we're in, right? And just understanding that concept and that differentiation.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Carissa. So now I have a couple of questions that I'd like everyone to answer. If you would want to give an additional response. And the first question is, what do you think about this discussion about changing the designation and dropping equity from DE&I? And what does that mean for you? And do you recommend that organizations use a more centrist approach in their positioning about DEI in their corporations? Who would like to answer that question first? Anybody?
I can go.
Okay, please go ahead.
I was really surprised when I saw that. And the rationale behind the SHRM statement was that, equity is divisive and polarizing. And I don't agree with that 100%. In fact, I think it's just the opposite. It is the lack of equity that creates divisions. We have no choice but to focus on equity. First, because different groups, they need different things. Just think, for example, we cannot assume that every employee wants to have Christmas Day off. Organizations, need to understand that there are many other religions in the workplace and they need to be respected. And in addition to diverse needs, there are still great, grave inequities that are in place that we need to address. Black women today make 69 cents of every dollar that non-Hispanic white men makes. The unemployment rate for people with disabilities is double the rate of those with no disabilities. And the unemployment rate for disabled women is much higher. It's at 20%. Look at the history of this country. Look at what redlining did. And I don't want to go into that. Low-income and minority populations often have less access to quality healthcare services. They don't have insurance, they have transportation barriers, fewer healthcare providers around in their communities. Let's not even go into what COVID-19 exposed, all the inequities that are still in place. The bottom line is that, the inequities exist today. They reflect a broader systemic issues that need to be addressed. So I think this statement came from a place where DEI is seen as a zero-sum game. One group's gain comes at the expense of another, which unfortunately is a common, way of thinking about DEI. I firmly believe that we cannot have an inclusive workplace until we have a workplace that is truly equitable.
Okay, thank you, Louisa. Daisy, do you have anything to say towards this question?
Yeah, I'm going to come from a slightly different angle. I think that people are being very hard on themselves. You know, I am a Muslim who has experienced what misinformation and misunderstanding does to a community, an issue, or social cause. And I see it from that lens. I see it from the lens of there is a cultural shift taking place in America, and that is creating an anxiety within certain groups of people. And that anxiety is then being reflected in DEI, which touches deeply held beliefs about identity, meritocracy, and is creating a polarized view between different political and ideological groups. And you can see this because media, which tends to be sometimes more liberal, even they're amplifying and distorting DEI issues, framing them as sensationalist and partisan. And then you have these high profile public debates and controversies that politicize DEI by drawing attention to certain aspects of it and inflaming passions. So I think that people need to stay true to what they have started here. And the reality is that younger workforce is demanding a more inclusive and equitable workplace. I've been doing trainings. I'm an outsider. I just came in and I'm seeing what people want and what they need. They want to understand because they have grown up with a diverse, diverse peers. They've grown up in schools. They've learned these things and they're demanding this not in their workplace. And this is why organizations need to stay with the DEI practices. Whether you call it inclusion or equity, it doesn't really matter. It's what you're doing in the workplace that matters. It's what are you, and I think we have to clear this misunderstanding because the truth is DEI is addressing very complex, and we've just heard that, complex and nuanced issues. And the public discourse should not reduce them to simplistic and polarized narratives. And I don't think we should allow this to get politicized, and we should really push back. But more than that, we should really reflect what the younger generations in the workplace need and want, because they are the future.
Thank you, Daisy. Tawana, do you want to address this question?
I wasn't going to raise my hand, Susan, but it ties back to what I said before. I think if it was called DR&I, diversity, revenue, and inclusion, CEOs would take it a hell of a lot more seriously.
Yeah.
Sorry, Susan, I couldn't figure out how to raise a hand. Can I just have a comment?
Well, let me just have them answer let me just see if anyone else wants to answer this question, then I'll get to you, Lulu. I also have a question from Julian. Francisco, do you or Carissa have anything to add on this?
Yeah, I think we all understand the reasons why this even came to be, right? They're talking about clarity in concepts and making sure that we eliminate that complexity, that or perceived complexity of equality, and focusing more on diversity and inclusion. And how challenging implementing equity could be and is expensive for organizations. So that's, relating it back to the last comment on revenue, I think that's part of it. There's also the whole thing about perceived fairness and the perception that equity measures can sometimes involve preferential treatment. So I understand those points of view. However, I think it's missing the point of really thinking about how to address systemic inequalities that have been present for years and years in the society, and that we need to think about the long-term sustainability of inclusive practices. So it's about a holistic approach, right? Where DEI efforts are most effective when they're comprehensive, and diversity focuses on the representation part, inclusion on the participation part, but equity on the fairness. And so if we remove the fairness from the process, we're really making a mistake.
Let me just jump in real quick to tie back to that, because if we're talking about preferential treatment, right? Again, I'm tying it back to revenue. How often do people look at organizations where top sales performers get what they deem unfair? Lavish trips, access to dinner parties, right? So it is fair when it's tied to outcomes and money, but it is unfair when it is not. And so.
Fair point. Very good. Thank you. I think you and Francisco are on a similar wavelength here. Carissa, do you have anything else to add? Because we have two questions from the audience.
Maybe just simply that I do think corporate politics, education's all tied. And I think in this day and age, you cannot say I am apolitical. I think you have to be paying attention and have a stance on something.
Okay.
Leave it at
Thank
that.
you so much, Carissa. All right. Lulu, I'll give you a second. Julian had a question for us and has been asking for a bit. Julian, do you want to unmute and ask your question, please? We'll have to keep it to one question.
Love to everybody from Santa Claus here. I do it in December. I was just picking up, Susan, from some great comments from Tawana and Daisy. Not easy in that area. I just think we need to rip up the narrative. If I was a big CEO of a global company, I would say, listen, let's just change the narrative. Let's stop. Forget about words of diversity and all that stuff. Let's go on a pilgrimage or a weekend away, engage with everybody, people by people, not the product, right? And I think that some groups, sadly, go the other way and spoil it for their own good. And I just think it's about communication and for CEOs and big people in big positions of authority to actually declare and have the space to say, you know what, I had a problem. I got beaten up by a black guy, maybe, or I got beaten up by a white guy when I was 12. If that stuff's not dealt with, and you know what I'm talking about, emotional intelligence, Carissa, thank you for mentioning that. I think a testimony from people in senior office with humility is powerful. I just wanted to throw that in the room, guys.
Excellent, Julian. Thank you. Lulu, do you have a question? And then we have one more comment question. We need a response from the speaker.
Sure. Thank you very much. I just want to expand what Louisa said previously about children from a very young age to learn about debate and what is right, what is right, what is wrong. I want to emphasize there is a cultural dimension to that. When I say a cultural and historical dimension, means all the Anglo-Saxon European culture derived from the dualism of the Greeks. So that means it's neither this or that. It's only a singular choice rather than a multiple choice. So that influenced the whole European thinking, including the churches. That's why it's very exclusive. It's like you're either with us or with enemies. So that kind of infiltrated in all these areas of thinking when it comes to DEI. That's why you say you addressed about it had a very long historical route. I think it's largely from this, the dualism thinking it's only have one choice rather than multiple choices.
Thank you, Lulu. I appreciate that. Are you looking for a response from anybody or? No.
Happy to. I just want to raise a point. Actually, it is just different dimension of addressing this issue.
Okay. All right. Please, all speakers, put your information in the chat. And if anybody who's on this call that would like to get in touch with any of our panelists who are all terrific today, you can reach out to me, susan@globalchamber.org. We did have one comment in the chat wanting to know if what was said by each one of the five of you, is it okay if you are quoted from what you said during this presentation? Because this will be recorded, so other people are going to see it. So does anyone have an issue with that if you're quoted from this presentation?
Susan, can I just raise an issue? You know, you're going to be careful what.
I just wanted to get an answer from the panelists. Are they okay with that?
Oh, the panel. Sorry, forgive me.
Okay, Tawana, Daisy, Francisco, Carissa, all good? Okay, good. Sorry, go ahead, Julian. Thank you.
No, I was just going to say, in these sort of debates, you always worry about what you've said and it being misinterpreted. But to be honest, I think there's been a good flavor in the room, and I hope Santa's said something quite helpful today.
I actually
edit it if it's not.
Julian, I actually appreciate that. You know, everyone's strangers kind of here, so I would prefer that if you're going to quote me in something that I also have visibility to what that is and where it's for.
Okay, all right. So in other words, it needs to be vetted. So if you're going to quote anyone here, you can send it to me and I will run it by the panelists. Let's do it that way. Okay, I think that is the best way to do it. And this presentation will be, has been recorded and it will be available to post on your websites. And, you know, in any other way that you would like to use it on LinkedIn or any otherwise. But I wanted to thank you guys for giving so much time. And I think we had a good conversation. I think we could go on for another hour. But unfortunately, I think this room needs to be used for another presentation. So if anyone is not a member that attended this call and would like to learn more about the Global Chamber, please reach out to me directly. Again, Susan@globalchamber.org. And once again, thank you, everybody. And this is an ongoing conversation that I'm sure we will continue to have, and certainly maybe we can speak amongst ourselves, among the 5 of us, or the 6 of us, or all of us. Okay, thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Susan, will you be listening to the whole thing? Because that might be an idea to assuage any concerns. Because if you've identified anything that someone might have said or whatever, I didn't hear anything controversial, but if you did pick it up, it'll be probably a good thing to go back to them and say, listen, we've got an issue with that. I doubt you'll find anything much,
Well,
but
Jillian, the way these Globinars are done, they're taped and just used as they are. We don't
oh, I
edit.
say, yeah, fine.
I think it's up to each individual, as I think we came down to now, if they want to be quoted, let the quotes be vetted through me. So Ashley, did you capture who that was that wanted to do that?
Carissa.
No.
Yes, yes. It was a I don't exactly know his name. It came up as TIL-LLC.
Okay, I'll find out. Alyssa, you're still on? We can stop the recording. Alyssa?